going on, everyone? Have you ever wondered about what is it like to actually work in medicine? Have you thought about going to medicine but don't know what it looks like or how real it gets? If so, man, we're in for a treat because I have a very special guest. Coming in, originally from Chicago, now based in New York. I have my good friend, fellow brother from another mother. He's an advanced endoscopy gastroenterologist. Anush, welcome to the show, man.
Absolute pleasure, Adi.
Yeah, man, it's been a long time coming, so I'm glad we got a chance to put this together. But yeah, dude, for me, man, I always love to start things off at the beginning. So my favorite question to always ask Anisha is like, in school, man, growing up, you have a lot of different types of personalities, right? You have the one who's like the very reckless. I'm gonna up, I have to like go to the principal's office, like, hey, he did it again. Always in trouble. You have the comedy, the clowning guy who's like the jokester. You have the one who's just very quiet the corner of the class, like just taking notes. So I guess of those three, were you any of those, or were you multiple versions of those people?
I guess for me, my personality really evolved as my schooling went on. I was born in India, Chennai. So when I moved here, initially I found it really hard to assimilate and get along with people for whatever reason. And initially I was very, very shy as well. So there's also that. It wasn't just the cultural differences. I was lucky enough to go to an international school when I was in Chennai. So it wasn't as the language thing wasn't as bad, I should say. We moved to Columbus, Ohio, me and my family initially. It was a smaller city, right? I wouldn't say a small town, but it was a smaller city. So not as much diversity. I was usually the only Indian person in the whole class, right? So that was also a thing. It's like, hey, not everybody looks like me. And as a second grader, you
Right,
think about these things, but you don't know exactly what it means, right?
right.
So I'd say so I moved when I was in second grade here, joined right in the middle of second grade. So everybody had already known each other for half the year in the class. So then it was just like, okay, you're coming to a new environment and in the middle of the school year. So it was a little hard to make friends, but eventually by the time I moved out of Columbus, Ohio, we moved straight to Chicago, Illinois, one of the suburbs, Buffalo Grove. And as soon as I got there, I actually noticed, wait, there's so much more diversity here. And for some reason, I don't know, I just felt a little more at home there. So I was able to make friends like this as soon as I moved to the Chicagoland suburbs. Now, still, I didn't really, for lack of better words, blossom into who I am right now in terms of my personality until like high school, actually. Never really hung out with too many people. And maybe it's because my parents were strict and they weren't, really about me going to hang out with people and stuff like that. And I guess I was generally a person who, listened to them. But when I was in high school, it's funny, as a shy person, I guess, like back in the day, AOL instant messaging actually helped me get through that, like, I don't know, barrier and start talking to people more. I was like, wait, I just, in my mind, I was like, oh, wait, I don't have to like go up to someone and say something. I could just like type to them and they would start a conversation. So, in a weird way, that actually helped me develop my personality. And then eventually, I wasn't really the jokester. I wasn't really a troublemaker. I guess I just like to organize things. So I'd like organize hangouts. We'd like play basketball at my house every single week. So I'd like get that together. So I was more of that guy. In high school, so I was like, I don't know, not prototypical, but maybe it's like stereotypical. I was in like some of the higher classes and stuff like that. So I would just be hanging out with them a lot. Didn't really get into trouble too much, but we had a good time just playing sports, playing video games, the good old stuff.
Shout out to AOL, man. I didn't know that. I think you were actually
Yeah.
probably you did the inverse because normally folks who interact digitally they become less social. And actually
Right.
enable. That's really cool. But no, man, props to you. I mean, dude, moving across the world and having to assimilate a new environment is no fun thing. But I'm glad, to your point of like the changing environment, you fit right in Chicago. So like that's dope
Yeah.
to hear.
Absolutely. And it was, yeah, I mean, the AOL, just going back to that real quickly, like it clicked to me. I was like, wait, this is possible. I can talk to people. It's not going to be awkward, blah, blah, blah. And just helped me along.
For sure, and that's facts. I mean, Anusha actually is the one that usually is planning outings like to hang out. So I'm not surprised by that, buddy. That's cool, man. So you talked about the social aspect. So I
Right.
think too in Chicago, I guess, and you mentioned you were taking the more higher like AP level classes in school. I guess
Absolutely.
what were some of the other activities? I know you mentioned sports. I guess how tapped in were you with sports? Were there any other activities that you also like drew an interest to at that point in your time?
Yeah, for sure. So just keeping in the sports theme, I did cross country and track. So I did JV and then varsity as I moved forward in high school. But also during high school is like right when I got into sports. So like professional sports, NBA, NFL, and then eventually actually baseball too, MLB. So how it started was my friends introduced me to basic fantasy football back in the day. So
Hey.
that really got me into it. And then my parents, like, you know, I didn't really grow up playing a lot of sports for whatever reason, but I think in seventh grade, my parents like put me in like a basketball league, and I was like, wait, this is so much fun. And then I was like, wait, there's you can watch sports as well. So that all really, really flooded into my personality as well. So like my AOL screen name was NBA Guy 8 because that was what I was really into. So then like sports stats, watching sports, playing sports really morphed my personality as well. So I did fantasy basketball, fantasy football, and then over the summer I was like, wait, there's no fantasy sports anymore. What the hell? So then I did fantasy baseball, which is wild because no one really does that. But you know, like 15 years later, here I am just doing all three. Those are some of the main things outside of school that really, really was a passion of mine.
That's dope. I'm not even gonna lie, man. You're the first person I know that plays fantasy baseball. Usually I know
Exactly.
football or basketball, but I heard it once that we're gonna do a snake draft of MLB, or whatever the equivalent is of that.
And it's funny because the first fantasy sport was actually fantasy baseball.
Okay.
So it's like people don't really know that, but that's what started it. And now it's just like pushed off to the wayside because football is just king. You know what I'm saying?
True, but I guess I'm curious, right? Because I feel like people go back and forth, like, what's America's sport, right? Like America's pastime
Right.
activity. I feel like I don't know. I feel like I could see a case for both. I think with baseball, but also I don't know. I feel like the NFL and the Super Bowl is a huge conglomerate. I don't know. Because what's your take on that? Like, if you had to
So,
say, like, what's America's pastime, sport wise, which one would it be?
so I think back in the day it was definitely baseball, but as football's popularity has grown, it's just taken over everything. And as our attention spans become shorter and shorter, we don't want to care about 150 plus games in a baseball season. We like the 16 games, or sorry, the 17 weeks or games of the NFL. We like to go, go, go and be done with it, right? So there's that. And then it's kind of crazy because I feel like NBA really came up in popularity and it's still super popular, but now like people follow NBA highlights more than the actual game. And then they get more pleasure like hearing about these trades versus watching the actual game. It's like they're in for the drama, but like not the actual games. And then people tune in for the finals or the playoffs or whatever. So it's like it's not appointment viewing, and if it is, it has to be like once a week. So it's like football just slides into people's life a little bit better. It's on Sundays, whatever, Thursday nights, Monday nights, and then you move on with your life. This is more of a long-term commitment throughout the year. So it's just like I got other stuff to do. So I think all of that factors into the popularity, the rise of football, you know, baseball not being as popular. So it's a very interesting dynamic in that sense.
For sure. I mean, Dan, you didn't have to call us out for, watching the shams tweets and the Woj bombs back in the day, but yeah,
Hey,
I mean,
it is what it is.
for sure, man. No, that's dope. I think so. Now that we got like a little bit of a flavor of like who Anush was like as a person. You and I both know. Growing up in a Tamil household, there's really two acceptable career paths. I think the third one is now lawyer, but like going into medicine, being an engineer, or now a lawyer, right? Those are like the three stamp of approval. You can go anywhere, like you're certified, like you're good. You're good in everyone's book.
Absolutely.
So I guess as you were like, growing up, right? Like, playing sports, you're going through high school. What was like Anush's, vision for what he wanted to do, for work? Everyone always asks kids and even now, like, what do you want to do when you grow up, right? Like, what was that initial answer you had
Right.
back then?
You know, it was tough for me initially because to a certain point my parents were like, "Oh, you should become a doctor." No one in our immediate family has become a doctor. You know, if your dad had more resources growing up, he would have become a doctor. So I always had that, you know, voice in my ear. But then eventually they were like, "I don't know if you're fully into it, so don't commit to something that you're going to need to work so hard for." So then my parents were like, "Oh, maybe you should just go into business. You know, there's a lot of great opportunities there." I don't know, I kind of took that not personally, but I was like, maybe this is a challenge. And, like I don't know, I took AP Bio and we did like a frog dissection or something. I was like, all right, this is kind of cool. And I couldn't really like I liked math, like I was good at math, but I didn't really like it. So I was like, okay, I can't be an engineer. I don't really like math. And then I was like, business, maybe, but I like science. Science is dope. So I was like, you know what? Let me just try to go for it. And my parents were like, oh, are you sure? You got to work really hard. And I was like, let me try to go for it. So then I buckled down, you know, in undergrad. Everybody knew if you were at Anush's place, that you had to leave by 10 p.m. because he was going to go to sleep because he had to grind to get into med school. And that was like, you know, had to take the MCAT, all that stuff. So when I got in undergrad, I grinded. And as I grinded, I found that I actually liked the subject matter even more. And it motivated me as I went. And as I got more exposure to medicine, it piqued my interest even more. So that all culminated in, you know, MCAT, medical school interviews and being lucky enough to actually attend medical school and progress my career.
That's awesome, man. No, I love what you talked about, like taking that challenge personally. Like, I just think of the Jordan meme of like I took it personal, like, like that from the last
Exactly.
second.
So I don't know if like
There's
my
that.
my
But no,
parents
it's dope to
like
see how fast times have changed, man. Like you talked about, like I know you now. When you're a host, man, I mean, it's not 24/7, but you're not really giving people the boot at 10 p.m. But back then it was like, hey, like this is what I'm on, this is what I got to do. And so
yeah,
props to you, because I think, dude, in college at 10 p.m. and you're living, assuming you're living like in dorms, that is tough. I
yeah,
feel like I would be on FOMO like 24/7 if that was the case. Like I'm hearing like the thumping music across the hallway, and I'm trying to study. So
yeah.
yeah.
It wasn't always easy, but it's like a weird thing where when I get locked in, I get really locked in. But then when I turn it off, I also know how to have a good time. So it took me a little while longer to realize my priorities, I guess. But when I did, it worked out.
I love to hear that. And I think too, the other question I have there, man, is I think when you think about college, right, undergrad specifically, that's usually like one of the few times in life where it's like you're just around a lot of people your age, right? Because as you know, like as you go into like meds, like as you progress in life, your career is like your families will take you like in dispersed places, so you're not around that many people. So I guess I'm curious. I know you locked in to get to where you are now, but how
Absolutely.
did you maybe find time to still be social? Take advantage of you meeting all the people that you could have
Yeah.
met in college? Or was that not even part of that experience for you?
No, I mean, so as I said, I love playing sports, right? So me and my roommate would go play basketball at the gym every Friday, Saturday, whatever. And then I also like when I at the end of high school, we had this like cultural show at my high school, right? So me and a couple of friends, we like ended up doing a dance performance. So then I was like, hey, I never really danced before in my life, but this is pretty sick. And then in college, I wasn't part of a dance team or anything, but they had these cultural shows where you could like, I don't know, you could do just practice once a week for 1 or 2 hours. So it wasn't very high commitment. And then in like, I don't know, February or March or whatever it was, we'd perform our dance. So I did that, met a lot of friends through that. I was involved in some like medical clubs and things like that. So I made friends there. And I don't know, it's just as the years went on, you just form powerful relationships with people that you either, meet randomly or intentionally through these clubs. And some of them have become lifelong friends. And that's kind of how it formed for me. And then I guess after I did well on the MCAT and stuff like that, I let loose a little bit more. People were allowed to stay after 10 p.m., you know what I'm saying?
Like
And then
10:30, or did you push
yeah,
it to
10,
11?
10:59, 10:59. I'm kidding. So then I took a little more freedom and liberty into enjoying college life and living in the city of Chicago.
That's great, man. And I think too. So I guess talk to me about the progression. I think you think Anush had to grow from undergrad to then when you started med school, right? Because I know that's a totally different animal. I think from what I've heard from even my own sister and like even talking to you like that, it's a whole different
Yeah.
level. So I guess mentally, do you feel like you had to do things to prepare to be successful in med school, or was that something once you got there, you're like, okay, like I got to reset what worked before wasn't going to work out?
Yeah. And a lot of people, as you said, have a tough time transitioning from undergrad to medical school, right? So one of my high school teachers once said this. It's like treat it like an 8 to 5 job, you know? Don't treat it like oh, it's a class and then like after that you do whatever you want. He actually said that about undergrad, but I think this applies to medical school. Like treat it like a full-time job, but what you do really depends on how you work. So everything has to be customized to your strengths in terms of what is it, studying, going to class, doing revising lectures, things like that. Because everything is online, right? All the lectures are recorded. No one's like taking attendance for every single lecture. So it's a very free flowing and individualistic process, right? So that kind of freedom with that high level of, required learning was very honestly, it was very tough for me. And I had just started to let loose a little bit right before, so I was like, okay, I got to really lock in, but I wasn't completely locked in the beginning. So that really caused me, issues in the beginning. But eventually you come into your own, get help with friends, figuring out study groups, things like that. And that helped me move forward. I was lucky enough to have a great group of friends in medical school as well. So we would pick each other up whenever it needed to happen. And then, you still had like intramural sports during med school, so you can blow off some steam in terms of that. But at the end of second year, you take, what is it, USMLE Step 1. So that's like a major landmark, right? So then you spent like 2 years grinding in the classroom, and everybody like does it, I guess not necessarily classroom, like in front of a video where the video lectures are coming, or in the classroom, right?
Right.
And that all culminates to this really one big exam where everybody's like, oh yeah, this is going to determine the future of your medical career. Like you get this specialty, or you can get into something you don't even want. So very, very high stress times. And little did I know that was like the beginning of the high stress times, because it just keeps coming right after that. I mean, it was a process, right? I did US only step one, and then third and fourth year we go into the hospital, and it's all rotation, so it's completely different, but also the same because you still have to study. However, you go to this 7 to 5 job or 7 to 3 job, and then you got to study afterwards, and then you're like, dang, I miss the days where I can just study whenever I want. So then it's just like taking it up a notch. So then you acclimate to that, and then you keep going, and then you find out where you match, right? You apply to all these. So I applied to internal medicine, which is general adult medicine, more in an inpatient hospital setting, but also a little bit of outpatient training, right? So I applied to that. It was funny. I was doing an away rotation in Innsbruck, Austria, when I found out where I matched. I was literally on the train, like it was a Friday. Like I found out I matched during the week, and then we find out where we matched on Friday. And I was literally on a train from Innsbruck, Austria to Vienna, Austria. And this is like, at that point in time, I had moved to the Chicagoland area when I was in fourth grade. And then I had lived there till the end of medical school, right? So here I am. I'm like, oh, yeah, I'm going to match somewhere in Chicago. It's going to be great. All my friends are here. And then I open the letter, and it's just like, oh, you matched in Shreveport, Louisiana. And I was like, huh, wait, what? So that was a huge shock, right? And so then I moved down to Louisiana. And then I feel like at that point in time, I really grew up. I was not near family anymore. I had to kind of figure out everything on my own. And, a lot of people do that at different points in time, right? I was blessed to have my family always around me, support me throughout everything. And it gets a little harder to support everything your son does, or, when he's in a completely different state, completely different type of environment and things like that. So it was at that point I was like, all right, it's time to really, really, really lock in again, right? So if you wanna achieve certain things, go to a different fellowship or a competitive fellowship and things like that, you had to really grind. You had to put your best foot forward every day, regardless of how you feel mentally, right? So you just got to put on a smile. And being in the hospital, it helps with that. So just seeing patients and knowing that they're going through something worse, and you being able to help them even in a slightly positive way, it helped me get perspective on how to, reorganize my priorities and just get it all in.
Wow, that was a lot to unpack in a good way. So I think there's a
Sorry,
couple
I
things that's
rambled.
no, it was great. I'm learning stuff I didn't know until today. So
Yeah.
I think the one you talked about was perspective. I think the
Yeah.
other part was the willingness to grow, and the third I think was really just um, embracing the challenge, right? Because like you said, even just from what we
Mhm.
talked, like I hope you're done with exams. From what I've heard, I feel like there's
We're
there's
not front.
always
Yeah.
it's like aha, I got you, like another one. I feel like it's like a leprechaun every time, every year. Like you guys have to like go like
Yeah.
overcome. But I think with that, you talked about finding your own groove. Because again, like you said, not everyone is going to study the same way, but you have to like find what works for you. But also, I think to what you mentioned about that ownership mindset, like look, treat this like a job. Like, yeah, I'm in school, but how you practice is how you play, right? Going back to sports, like, if you practice like you're not gonna like score 30, then you're not gonna do well. And I think with that, I was gonna ask, what were the nerves like in terms of like the matchsticks? I've heard, from like family what it's like. I know from email when I go for like job interviews, like I'm frantically checking my email, right, for an update. Like either you get it
Exactly.
or it's a thank you email. You're frantically checking. So I guess what was that experience like? And I think especially while you were abroad, right? Because I
Right.
think you had a lot of cool exposure to like practicing like your craft like in a different place. Like that's the one good thing I would say medicine does. I mean, it maybe takes you away from family, but you get a chance to explore the world too.
Absolutely. The fact that I was away from, my peers in Chicago, because I was in Chicago Medical School, I guess it kind of took the edge off a little bit. But, like the 4 or 5 people that were there with me in this away rotation, we were all like, it was still there, right?
Right,
And for me, at that point in time, before I opened that match day letter, I had just like taken it for granted that, oh yeah, I'll just end up in Chicago. And at that point in
right.
time, I was like, I don't think I'll ever leave Chicago. Like, it's the best. Like, why would I leave anywhere else? You know what I'm saying? Like, my family's here, all my friends are here. It's the dopest city in the world. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Right.
Why would I even think about that? It was the nerves itself. I didn't have as many just because I just assumed. But that's what do they say? When you assume, you make an ass out of you and me, right? So that's when life was like, okay, we'll teach you a little something. And then it was, yeah, it was shocking. It was unnerving after that, but I would not be the person today if I had matched in Chicago, or, and been more comfortable with my life. It pushed me out of my comfort zone and made me the person I am today.
For sure. I guess with that, did you know anyone in Louisiana? Like either just colleagues or people outside of medicine? When you went, or you just literally knew no one? Like it was like, all right, like I know like a couple of people I'm going to be working with, and that's
Yeah.
about it. Did you have anyone?
It was really weird. I have one of my best friends, his name is Ashish from undergrad. He had a buddy who I peripherally knew was actually
Right.
from Shreveport, Louisiana. Okay. And I had like talked to this guy like 4 or 5 times in undergrad. He actually ended up stopping school a little early just to start a business in Shreveport. So like we kind of like I hadn't really, it hadn't registered to me. And then Ashish was like, I think Vishal is there. I was like, wait, what? So then I reached out to him, and actually he was very helpful in helping me like get some stuff sorted out when I initially got there. But other than him, who was like kind of a peripheral friend of a friend, I knew no one. And it was, yeah, it was a very interesting experience. Two people I interviewed with in Shreveport actually ended up matching in the program. So when I got there, we all looked at each other, we were like, wait a minute. We all interviewed together, and one of them gave me a ride to the interview, or sorry, from the interview dinner to my hotel. And the next day, the other guy gave me a ride from the interview to back to my hotel. So we all kind of like, we're like, oh, wait, I remember that one guy from the interview. We all were there. And then they didn't know anybody. And then, so I had two friends when I got there. And then eventually you just get more friends, and everybody's just grinding, and you just grow with that.
That's no. I mean, to your point, you just at a point where like, well, look, here's where I'm at. I might as well make the most out of it. Like, there's no point
Yep.
being on the bush. And to your point, like, if you have big goals and things you want to achieve, sometimes you just have to tune out the emotion aspect of it and just do it.
Mm-hmm.
So I love that.
Absolutely.
I'm curious that from your perspective, man. So I think obviously like leading up to medical school, right, and like the
Yeah.
second and third, or the third and fourth year rotations, and obviously when you're in the trenches of residency, like you're in it, right? It's not just about learning it from like online classes and like books. How
Yeah.
much did that shape, I guess, which specific path in medicine you want to go down? Like, were there like moments
Absolutely.
like in residency where you're like, oh, like this is really cool. I want to do more of this, or definitely not that or anything, but let me
Yeah.
go a different direction. I guess how much did like actually practicing what you were learning like reinforce or not reinforce what you wanted to do?
So in the first year of medical school, we were doing our like, traditional anatomy lab. Everybody dissects a human cadaver. We learn about all the different body parts from a structural perspective, and then connect it to the function, which is the physiology of the body. So when I was doing that, I was like, wait, this is really cool. I don't know, this may sound weird, but like, hey, these are the small intestine, these are the large intestine. This is how everything connects, and then this is the gallbladder, this is the liver, the pancreas. So I don't know, I just felt a little more comfortable with, I don't know, dealing with the GI system. So I was like, hey, maybe I should become a surgeon. They're always, fixing things in the gut, things like that. So then in third year, when we were doing our surgery rotation, surgery, as a profession is just a little more intense. It's a little more high stakes, high risk. And it's that way because there's a lot on the line at all times, right? So at that point in time, I was like, it made me rethink. Maybe this isn't right for me. And then people started talking to me about, hey, if you like the GI system, then why don't you just do gastroenterology? Why do you have to do surgery where it could be like anything? And I was like, that's interesting. Yeah, maybe I will look into that. And then I was like, okay, then I got to do 3 years of internal medicine and then apply. And I was like, well, all my relatives are just already asking me random questions. And I'm like a first year like medical student, like third year medical student that doesn't really know anything. So maybe I should go into general adult medicine and like know how to answer all these questions. And
Right.
then I could specialize after that. So that played a factor too. I was like, all right, let's become like a full all-rounded general medical adult doctor. And then I can also pursue my passion after that. So that was like a step-by-step process. And then I was left lucky enough to actually achieve all these steps and goals along the way. And here I am.
Beautiful. And so I think too, we talked about being in Louisiana. So I guess what was the process like to go from, Seaport, Louisiana, not exactly New Orleans, to the
Yeah,
Big
yeah,
Apple? What was that like? So once residency was done. So I know like
sure.
fellowships like the next benchmark, right, in the journey.
Right. So I did 3 years of internal medicine in Shreveport, and then it was time to apply to gastroenterology, right? So then I
Right.
was like, okay, so I had some interviews in Chicago. I had the interview at the home institution, Shreveport, and I was lucky enough to get offered a position in the gastroenterology fellowship in Shreveport. But it was kind of a pre-match at that time. So they were like, hey, we're not going to wait for the actual match date when we let the computers decide. We like you enough that we'd like to offer you a spot to stay in Shreveport, but you'd have to withdraw from the other interviews that you had. So I
Oh,
was like, so it was a choice, right? But for me, it was like, well, I know this is one of the most difficult specialties to get into after internal medicine. It's super competitive. And after going through all the stuff I'd gone through, I was like, pick who picks you. You know what I mean? They like you. I'm comfortable with where this is, and I'm comfortable spending the next 3 years here for the betterment of my career goals and things like that. So in that sense, I took it and ran with it, and I never looked back at that. I actually did one more year of fellowship after completing 3 years in Shreveport, and that was in Milwaukee. So I did an advanced endoscopy fellowship for that. And that was actually a match process too. But this time I actually went through the match. I had a couple interviews in New York, and then I had one in Milwaukee, and I ended up matching in Milwaukee. Milwaukee's like an hour away from where I grew up, literally. Like it was like a suburb of where I grew up, suburb of my suburb. So I got to be close to my family for a year, get excellent training. One of my mentors, Dr. Gouda, there, and it was great. And then after that, I was like, I think I want to explore New York City. I visited my cousin Shabu, who is the one that you know very well. I think you maybe
yeah,
interviewed him
that
a couple
too.
of times, and I was like, I want to see what this New York City is about. For the first time in 7 years, I got the opportunity to pick where I wanted to live, and I was like, why not just go big? Let's dive into the culture there, see what it's all about. Reset things on the other level, right? We went from Chicago, then we went to Shreveport, Milwaukee. It's like let's get to the big city a little bit, make some friends, have some fun, and here I am. The job's been great, and I feel like I'm making a difference in the community. And what else can there be, right?
Absolutely, man. And I think to your point, it's been a journey, right? To where I think in medicine it's like the one like career path where I feel you just have no leverage in terms of where you have to go, right? Like in tech, but you can like intentionally choose like where do you want to go, like for work and stuff. But
Right.
here it's like you got to go where they say we want you. So I think was there a moment of like reflection? You just appreciate your journey when you're like, I finally, in basketball terms, I have free agency, like I have mobility, I can
Mhm.
go where I want, it's my choice, versus like I was hoping someone gives you a shot. So what was that like moment when you realized I have a chance to go where I want?
It was probably after I got into GI fellowship, right? It was after the first 3 years of internal medicine, and then I was in my final field, right? So gastroenterology. At that point in time, everybody knew it's like, hey, we're kind of at the end game of our training. I ended up doing another year, but we're kind of at the end game. We all know what our career is going to be for the rest of our life in this specialty. At that point, people started doing job searches like 6 months into that fellowship, even though it was like a 3 year fellowship. One of the guys that I did training with, he was a year ahead of me. He signed a job, I think, like within a year and a half, and then they were paying him a stipend while in fellowship so that he would commit to them and then join them after that. So for me, it was just like, okay, do I go back to Chicago? Do I do other things? And that's when some of my travels, led me to New York City. But it was definitely liberating because you're no longer not at the whim, but it's just like you're no longer beholden to a system, which may seem archaic, but is there for a reason, and you're finally able to explore where you want to go. You know?
Totally. And I think with that, you highlighted an earlier point about like mentorship, right? So I know obviously like medicine's its own like own lane, but I guess there's this concept, I think people talk about it's like your board of directors, like a sounding board, where you can leverage for advice, right? When making, decisions, whether it's, big leaps or even just small micro decisions. So I guess do you feel like you've benefited from having like a board of directors, like a group of people you can call like mentorship as you were navigating this process, or did you kind of just figure it out as you went? I guess what is your take on that?
Yeah, so both my parents, neither of them were in medicine, and I just felt like, to a certain extent, I just kind of figured it out on my own. I would talk to certain people that I commute or like vibe with, for lack of better terms, a little bit better than others along the way. But I guess one person that really did help me along the way was one of my attending physicians who was like one of my bosses during fellowship, Dr. Papayanis. So whenever I had a question, I was comfortable enough in asking. He was like, hey, this is what I'm thinking. And he had actually trained in Long Island. So he kind of knew the New York scene. So I was like, all right, there's that too. So whenever I had a question, even when I was in Milwaukee, like interviewing for these New York jobs, I would give him a call who was still in Shreveport. be like, hey, this is what's going on. What do you think? And he was very helpful for that. And then obviously when I was in Milwaukee, when I was doing my interviews, my program director there, Dr. Guda, would also give me advice on, hey, look out for this, that. And then he was always like, you should just join us, man. But I was like, yeah, maybe, in the future. And I absolutely super thankful for all the advice and everything that he gave me. So I had a couple key individuals that kind of helped me through that. And obviously, even though my parents were not in medicine, they were with me every step of the way and being like doing whatever they could in terms of giving me advice. And then I'll every now and then trying to bribe me to come back to Chicago because who doesn't want their son back in their city, right? So
Man,
it was a whole lot of figuring it out on my own. But eventually, whenever I came to the point of being comfortable to ask for help or guidance, I was able to find those right people when I needed it.
that's dope. 'Cause I think again, like from what I've heard, I feel like at times it feels like it's a solo mission. Where it's like you feel like a lot of people can't relate to your journey, right? Because you're having to bounce from city to city. Exams that determine the fate of your life. Like not to be dramatic,
Yep.
but like like every year, like this, it's high stakes, and really, unless you're going through that or have gone through, like very few people can actually like be there for you in that sense. I guess so. With them, I guess what would you tell, let's say, 18-year-old Anush, like who's
Yeah.
about to start this journey? What would you tell them, like advice, or would you tell them to do anything differently, or are you the type where it's like you just
Yeah. First of all, whenever we go through this exercise, the 18-year-old's probably not going to listen to you. That's the number one thing. Because when I was 18, I didn't want to listen to anybody, my parents, my friends, whatever. You know what I mean?
right?
And you act like you think you know everything. So that's one thing. It's just anyway. But if they were to listen, what I tell them? First of all, take opportunity of what you're given. Because I feel like in the beginning I took a lot for granted, right? Where I lived,
Mhm.
the comforts of home, the comforts of family. So take opportunity of that and don't let any of that go to waste. I grew up very privileged, right? My parents had stable jobs. They offered me support every step of the way, financially, be it financially or emotionally, everything, right? I had a great younger brother who would do the same for me. So take advantage of where you are in life because it's hard to keep perspective, especially at that young age. And then another thing is, when stuff goes wrong, no one is really going to feel bad for you. You have to move past this. Like you can't wait around for people being sorry or feeling sorry for you. And at certain points I was like, man, this sucks. This sucks. And if you like just dwell on it, it's not going to change. And people keep moving. Life keeps moving. And if you don't move with it, it's just you're just wasting time, you know? And that will affect you taking advantage of where you are in life. So those are two main things. And then it's just work hard. Don't be afraid to work hard. That's what like people would ask me in residency when they were first coming into residency, like, hey, what advice would you give us? And I'd be like, don't afraid to work hard. Don't be afraid to stay the extra 20, 30 minutes learning about something that you had a doubt about earlier. Don't be afraid to stay an extra 20, 30 minutes and actually go talk to that patient and answer their questions because those 20, 30 minutes may not seem like a lot to you, but it will really affect the other person tremendously. And it's just hard work cannot be understated. I mean, it's a cliche, but working hard, working smart, and just keep on going on. You know what I mean? No one's gonna feel sorry for you. You got to go and take advantage of it. Seize the opportunity, seize the day, because that day will not come back.
Loved every part of that, man. That I love the ownership mindset there, and I think too. I guess switching that up a little bit. I guess now you're in New
Yeah.
York, man. What has that vibe been like? Obviously, you've been all over. You've been in, Chicago, Seaport, Milwaukee, now the big city. I guess what has that been like for you transitioning? Because again, I think obviously you have lived there for a little bit. It's a little bit of a shell shock, like the first few months, and like finding your groove, and I think
Yeah.
all of that. So, what was that ramp up or just transition for you? Where you're like, you're starting a new job, you got to figure out how to use the
Yeah.
subway, like which clients to take, and just deal with the New York culture, which it is.
Absolutely. So when I was moving to New York City, a big thing was, hey, I'm moving to this job. It's in South Brooklyn. It's kind of far away. Do I take a car? Do I not take a car? And so that was a big thing. Eventually, I decided, the financial costs and just like the mental burden of like having a car in Manhattan wasn't worth it for me, especially when I was the first time moving to Manhattan. And the fact that I had actually lived in the city of Chicago helped a little bit because when I was living in Chicago, I didn't have a car during undergrad. So I was completely reliant on the public transport there. And the L over there is very good. So when I came here, I felt like that really helped me in terms of being able to navigate things a little more. Obviously, New York City is a whole different animal, but I feel like I had some sort of familiarity, I don't know, with like train etiquette, things like that. So that helped me out. Another thing that really was a blessing in disguise ish was when I moved to New York City, there was delays in getting my medical license. So my start date got pushed about 2 months after I moved here. So I couldn't practice medicine. So I was like, wait, I'm just here. My lease started. So that actually helped me get accustomed to the life and living out here, the pace a little bit more before I jumped into my job, right? I was able to figure out the train system instead of being like, hey, I landed in New York City on Friday, and then on Monday, I got to get on a train and get to South Brooklyn where I work. You know what I mean? So
Right.
that I feel like helped me move things a little more easy and framed everything for me. And then honestly, having my cousin Shubona here was a big, big bonus. So whenever I had any question, I had a go-to guy helping me out with that. And then also just socially, right? So he'd be like, hey, I'm hanging out with these people, pull up or whatever, you know? And I met a lot of great people, including you. And then I would just like kind of invite people over to my place and be like, hey, you seem cool. Let's hang out. And then I think I hadn't even met you, or I met you briefly. And then you came
Yeah.
over because we were like, I had some people over and you're like, hey, yeah, I'll come through. And then you were also looking for friends. I was looking for friends. And then that's how the network grows, right? New York City, yeah, it's whenever you go out, whether it's a restaurant or even, you're just casually out drinking with your friends, you often find that it's like, hey, that guy wants to be friends with me. Cool, we're friends now. It's a little more open in terms of other people wanting to be friends with you than anywhere else I've lived in my life. So that also helped. I've just made random friends at a night out and without even thinking that was what would happen. So all these things have made it a little easier in my transition here.
Totally. I think to your point, I think New York is the closest to like being back in college. So the thing I think even like in the Bay, there's other places where you have to drive, right? I think there's the aspect of now I have
Yeah.
to find time on our calendar. We're at that age now, hey, like what are you doing Saturday at like 2 p.m., like 3 weeks from now?
Yeah.
And then you gotta figure out how to like it's just there's more barriers to entry like to have a hangout versus in New York, it's like usually, luckily like whether it's you or other folks, everyone was like a couple subway stops away. So like, bet I'll catch you in 20. Like you could pull a spontaneous
Exactly.
hang and see people more like that. Yeah, people are open to meet. Right? That's why people come to New York. It's like you can just meet a lot of cool people.
Exactly. Meet people. Everybody wants to experience different things. There's always something going on. And, everybody's just growing together.
Totally. So on the bucket list in New York, I guess what are things that you haven't
Yeah.
checked off yet, that you're dying to check off?
Let's see here. So, done a lot of cool things. I'm still trying to find my favorite pizza spot. New York pizza is like a big thing, right? So,
Oh, you're
I
coming
still
from
got to
Chicago.
make it to, yeah, exactly, right? Especially coming from Chicago because there's a huge beef with that. I love my deep dish. Deep dish is great, and I'll never ever, give up on that. But I will say, there's a big like there's a lot of variety of quality in terms of the deep dish in Chicago. If you don't know where to go and you go to this random spot and it's not as good, it's like, yeah, that's true. So I'll cop to that as well. But I've had a couple pizza spots, but I'm still looking for the holy grail in that sense. And it's unlimited here, so it's maybe not the complete end all be all in that sense. Other than that, done comedy shows. Oh, there's one thing. I gotta go check out the Knicks play. They actually play right over here. So gotta go to see the Knicks play. I gotta go check out a Jets or Giants game. So hit all the parks. I've seen the Yankees play, but I haven't seen the Mets play. So I got a couple of those things. I've hit up a lot of rooftops, stunning views around here. I still have to explore Queens a little bit, figure out the food scene there, and then just to check off the bucket list also, Staten Island. Got to hit up all the five boroughs if you're living in New York City. So I guess there's that. Other than that, just seeing what life has. I've been lucky enough to hit up a lot of the bucket list stuff already, so it's been good.
For sure, man. Well, next time you're on the show, we're gonna recap and see where you're at with
Bet.
that. For sure, man. No, we can go on and on. Just a couple more rapid fire questions for you
Yeah.
today, man. So I think you've had a really long journey to get to where you are today. But I'm curious, when you think about, let's say, 20, 30 years from now, or just even long term, right? I don't want to put a time constraint on
Yeah.
it. When you think about the space you're in, I guess what is that impact you want to leave behind? Where it's like, hey, like at the end of my career, like this is what I've been able to do. Is there any like visions or just any specific things you're like, hey, this is what I'm chasing after, or you're building towards?
Right. So within medicine, there's many lanes that you can kind of focus in. One of them is, I want to be a cutting edge researcher, right? I want to be doing trials on drugs that can really make improvements in patient care. So that's one lane. There's another lane where, hey, I want to help shape the future of medicine by teaching young doctors or, college students even as they progress and become their own physicians. So there's the mentorship type of lane. And then what I've kind of morphed into is more of a private practice setting, right? So how do we deliver efficient and honestly the best medical care we can to patients, but in a more private practice setting? Right. So efficiency is a real big key to that, right? So when sometimes you go to the hospital or you go to the doctor's office and you're sitting there waiting for your doctor to come see you, and then after that, you have to wait a long time to get the care in like a procedure or things like that. So how do we optimize that process? How do we make it more efficient and without sacrificing quality, right? So sometimes the best compliments I get when I see a patient is like, you were thorough, you were informative, I really understood what was going on, and I felt like you cared, right? When you go to see a physician, you want them to treat you as a person and the malady that you're maybe dealing with, right? So it's more about what the patient feels after they leave my office, right? Like it was worth my time. It was time well spent, and I'm going to feel better, right? So that's kind of where I want to leave medicine as a whole, right? What the patient's reaction would be. And I want those three reactions. Very simple, but it's not always easy to achieve. So it's a work in progress as a society, like as a medical society, I should say. Those are things that are constantly in flux based on, just simple things as staff turnover versus the equipment everybody has to deliver this care. But those are things that I really want to focus on and make better so that a patient can come in and leave my office or my procedure with those three main things.
Props to you, man. No, I think that's really powerful. Hey, I feel like at times, like you was given to your point, the constraints, it may feel like you're in and out of the doctor's office like in 5 minutes. Like, well, I just got here. I waited for an hour like to like really get my questions answered,
Exactly.
but they got to keep up with demand. But no, that's dope. We look forward to seeing all that impact when you're back on again. And so my last question, Matt, is where can people get in contact with you or keep up with you as you check off all
Sure.
these things on your bucket list in New York and drive a bigger impact into space?
So I'm currently at Gastroenterology Associates of Brooklyn. We're located in South Brooklyn. We have a couple clinics in Bay Ridge and Midwood, and then we're also opening an office in Long Island in the future. So that's where you can find me. You can find me on ZocDoc.com. You can find me on, just Google Maps. You can just search my name and I'll come up. And in the future, we're hoping to expand collaborations with hospitals, collaborations with other clinics, things like that, primary care physicians' offices, to make sure that we can give patients access to our services without them having to seek us out, right? So a primary care physician can just be like, hey, I know this great gastroenterologist. So we're trying to spread word on a grassroots level in that sense, and then also just create awareness in terms of colorectal cancer screening and all the things that need to happen. So
Awesome, man. Well, no, appreciate the time, Anush. We definitely got this again soon. And with that, folks, signing off from that you showed it.